Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Dan Pugh.
And I'm Shauna Harrison. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Do you ever feel completely out of place? For me, this happens nearly any time I attend social events. Clubs and parties are generally not a problem for me, but an icebreaker event for a new job, I might hyperventilate. In those structured social moments when I'm expected to make polite but slightly meaningful small talk and connect with other humans, I'm like a fish out of water.
Oh man, that's such a good phrase, and I do also feel this a lot. I feel like a fish out of water because I'm not a very good dancer, so I just don't know what to do with myself, probably because I have no training whatsoever. But I also feel the same way with like icebreaker stuff because, and I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but like I don't mean to be mean or anything, but we're not friends. We work together.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to tell you about my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rest of the people in the office don't need to know about my life. We're not friends. We work
Right.
together. You pay me and then I go home back to my family and friends. So like, I mean, I get that that's not the case, although it is becoming more and more the case, I think, as people go on. I hear more and more people say that kind of thing. But yeah, I do feel like a fish out of water and icebreaker stuff. So I'm very excited to hear more about this because, yes, I really feel your opening hook.
A lot of people can also probably guess at part of the meaning of the phrase. Fish live in water, so a fish out of water is not where it's supposed to be. It's not in its safe, natural environment, and sometimes, they can't survive out of water. So,
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
very, very true statement.
According to Oxford English Dictionary, to be like a fish out of water means, quote, to be in an uncomfortably unfamiliar environment or situation, to be out of one's element, end quote.
All right. That is my familiarity with the phrase as well.
Yeah. There's another version of the phrase, sort of, that's like a fish on dry land or like a wet fish on dry land.
Neither of those has the same, what's it called, mouthfeel for your ears. They don't sound as good.
Cadence, they don't sound as good.
They don't sound as good.
Yeah, they don't. They're not used as much as fish out of water. They only have some small blips of use over time. And it's also not used consistently to mean the same thing. It's occasionally used to describe physical appearance, specifically. And since it doesn't quite match the meaning we're looking at, we're going to stick with fish out of water. The earliest appearance of the concept of fish out of water is found in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in the prologue, which was originally written around 1387 to 1395 and published around 1405. So this is a while ago. Quote, a monk, when he is reckless, is likened to a fish that is waterless, end quote. In the prologue, various characters in the tales are introduced. The monk being described participates in activities that are more worldly than the typical monk lifestyle would allow for. This would indicate that the monk is either not suited for these activities or perhaps not suited to fill the role he has committed himself to.
Right. I feel like maybe Chaucer didn't play Dungeons and Dragons because the monks in Dungeons and Dragons are oftentimes doing very well outside of their element, but It's fine. Also, by the way, euphonious is the word I was thinking of. Yeah,
okay.
It doesn't, something that sounds
gotcha.
pleasant to the ears, Yes, and I was like, mouthfeel for the ears, which is just...
You made it
I
terrible.
hate that. No, that is awful. That is awful. Like, I'm not even sure I like mouthfeel for wine now anymore. Like, it sounds bad, but euphonious is the word I was thinking of. Yeah.
Euphonious, I feel like is a euphonious word.
It is. It sounds so good. Say it again.
Euphonious.
Mufasa.
The phrase was also used in a piece about society published in 1585. This time, the piece was written as a plea to the government on behalf of the people. Author credit is attributed to Robert Waldegrave for the 1585 work, A Lamentable Complaint of the Commonalty, by way of supplication to the High Court of Parliament for a learned ministry. Quote, but all this time while you reason with us, of these matters, we think ourselves in a wilderness, or as a fish out of water, end quote. In that particular section of the work, the concern was being expressed that when heavy theological questions or intense contemplations were brought up, the common people and unlearned ministers were not equipped to engage in conversation or consideration of those topics. So those were the individuals who felt like fish out of water in that context. So we can see from these early references that the phrase was used to describe uncomfortable situations, but no one was in any true physical distress. The phrase was used at times to express that a person might be in physical danger in some way, but primarily it's been used in the more figurative manner related to emotions and feelings. For example, I can completely empathize with this next excerpt, which comes from the 1738 work, The Art of Conversation by Stefano Guazzo. Quote, "You make me apprehensive that I am in a worse case than I was aware of, for I gather from your words that you rank me among the melancholy, whose senses are so blunted that they cannot distinguish the difference of tastes. But if I don't flatter myself, I have a whole mind within this crazy body, and my relish of pleasure is the same with other men of the nicest palate. And though it is true that there are some who delight in company, yet I am acquainted with many men of unquestioned valor and deep understanding, to whom nothing is more irksome than company, and when forced out of their beloved solitude are like fish out of water." End quote.
Nice.
Very well said. The work Principles of Virtue and Morality, or Essays and Meditations on Various Subjects by David McBride, was published only a year later in 1739. It gives advice to those approaching the end of their career and warns that if one does not consider ahead of time or make plans, quote, "he will, like a fish out of water, pant after his natural element. Retirement will become like a prison to him." End quote. A lot of the thoughts shared in this work about retirement might still apply today. I've watched as people have retired, and often when asked shortly after, they admit they aren't sure what to do with their time, and they just feel all off or out of sorts. They are definitely describing that fish out of water feeling. But talk to them again in a few months or a year, and they're as busy as ever with whatever things they've selected to fill their time.
I will say that when my paternal grandmother retired, she said, and I visited one time, and I said, "Hey, Grandma, how's retirement going?" She goes, "I don't know how I ever found time to work." She was volunteering in so many places. She was really big into the Methodist, which is a denomination of Christianity, evangelical Christianity. So she was a Methodist, and they had so many different volunteer opportunities that she was taking such a strong inkling in. And like it was mostly just church stuff, right? But like she had taken so many opportunities to volunteer that she was right. Like she goes, "I don't know when I ever found time to work." I wish for everyone to be like my grandma was in her retirement.
Yeah, that's awesome. That was a couple of things that were pieces of advice was kind of consider the things that you enjoy doing and keep doing them, after your retirement and keep in touch with the people that you care about. So it's like, oh, that makes sense. Absolutely. The phrase was used for the title of a show that played in many regional theaters. It was listed under showtimes in the August 28, 1823 edition of the Morning Chronicle out of London, Middlesex, United Kingdom. Here is that listing. Quote, "Theatre Royal, Haymarket. This evening will be presented Matchmaking, after which The Barber of Seville, to conclude with Fish Out of Water." End quote.
So this was
Live
a
performance.
play, yeah, a live
Yeah.
performance. Okay.
Mhm. So, and it was in a lot of newspapers. That was the bulk of what I found in that time
Yeah, I
frame.
bet.
Was
Yeah.
that same play?
Sometimes a
film.
little behind the scenes for you all. Sometimes when we're researching, if something like this hits it really big in the newspapers, especially pre 1960, boy, it was just it's really hard to sift out that one instance that
Yeah.
gets reposted in every newspaper across the United States and Canada and
For
the
several years.
UK and potentially Australia, and yes, for potentially 3 to 4 years sometimes, and it's really hard to parse that out because it literally just gets shared and shared and shared. It's like nowadays when we talk about something going viral, like that's exactly the same thing happened in the newspapers back then.
Yeah.
It would be there for 3 or 4 years. It would just keep getting reposted. Not necessarily a show, because the show would be relevant only while it's running,
Right.
but a good
Poems
story
sometimes,
would
and
just
yeah.
get reposted and reposted and reshared over and over again in newspapers all across the world, the English speaking world, and for 2, 3, 4 years
Yeah.
in a row. Yeah.
The Black Hills Union out of Rapid City, Pennington County, Dakota, now South Dakota, used the phrase for a piece intended to make people think in the April 9th, 1897 edition. Quote, "A fish out of water." The traditional notion of a fish out of water is that of a helpless, gasping creature. There are some fish, however, that deliberately choose to diversify their existence by seeking land and air. The perch often leaps into the air for flies and can be carried long distances in damp grass without suffering harm. One of this species, which is common in India, often leaves his pool and takes a short journey over the grass. He seems to prefer to take these excursions by night or in the early morning, when he can be refreshed by the dew, but sometimes, no doubt, led by urgent necessity, has been known to travel some little distance over a hot, dusty road under the midday sun. End quote.
So this bird or this fish will jump out of the water, be a literal fish out of water, and flop around into another body of water.
They don't just flop. So I was curious. I was like, is this even real? And I think the type of fish they're discussing here is likely a climbing perch.
Okay.
And we're going to dive into this a little bit during the bonus segment of our behind the scenes video, which you can access each Friday at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
I am looking forward to hearing more about this at the end of the program.
Yeah, very fun.
All right.
The Day Book, March 28th, 1912, out of Chicago, Illinois, included the phrase in their advice and jokes section. Quote, "Ruth, when Steve proposed to me, he acted like a fish out of water. Buddy, why shouldn't he? He knew he was caught." End quote.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
But
stuck in the web of marriage. All right.
Yeah. I basically have determined that dad jokes have been circulating for centuries. It's like the same dad jokes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They're around.
Oh, yeah. Naturally.
Yeah. So, and like that, our phrase has clearly done the same thing. We can find fairly consistent use since Chaucer shared the concept in his tales, while the severity of the idea of a fish out of water might change from one usage to another. The general concept has remained essentially the same throughout these different references. We have a couple more in our historical references, and then we're going to go to our modern ones. In the Seward Seaport Record, December 10th, 1948, out of Seward, Alaska, an article comments on the role of men and women during a major labor strike. Quote, "Women of Seward, if I wore a hat, I would certainly say, 'My hat is off to you.' During the past 3 hard, anxious months, I heard very little complaining, many it can't be helped shrugs, and half-provoked comments, but little downright bitterness. When the pull was hardest, and the menfolk were home underfoot day after day, or roaming the streets like fish out of water, or do fish out of water roam the streets? Anyway, it was the women who kept the heads and optimistically looked forward to the end." End quote.
Gotcha. Okay, so it was the men who were mostly out of work because of the labor strike.
Yes.
And the women who then have all of their full-time job stuff to do, the home life stuff.
Yeah.
And then also still have to be on the go after what the men are already done with their hard work, right? The women just have to keep going. But now they have their hard work that they have to do while the men were there too.
Yeah,
so,
while the men are at the house and they're, they don't know what to do with themselves.
Maybe this is before the days of them making them go stand on the picket lines. Maybe that's where picket lines came from. I don't know. I'm making this up, but maybe it was the women who are like, "Get out of, you are not supposed to be here right now for me to be able to do all the things that need to get done. I'm literally killing the chicken and plucking and cooking and all of these things. So would you please just go back to work or go strike or carry a sign?" I could see that if that's where striking started from, or picketing, where the women were just like, "Go make you a sign. I will make you a sign. Get out of my house so I can do the things that you want me to do. Get out. I will do that. You go stand there and tell people why you are not working right now."
I'm loving this. I think
I hope that's the origin. It's almost certainly not, but boy, I wish it was.
This has been a really fun conjecture, and I think that you need to do Picket Line.
Don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Well, so from the perspective of the men, mostly men here, without knowing the details of the specific situation being discussed, I'm sure there were a lot of difficult emotions going on for those who were on strike.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like the obligation to their families and possibly to their company, and that need to feel appropriately compensated. There's probably some personal dignity and pride going on. Choosing an action that is also a non-action, even for what one has deemed to be a worthy cause, can feel pretty strange. So I think fish out of water is like the perfect phrase for this circumstance, because they probably were feeling pretty...
I could see that.
A Fish Out of Water by Helen Palmer, illustrated by P.D. Eastman.
Go Dog Go.
Yes.
Sorry, I have children that are of a certain age, and I just remember reading Go Dog Go by P.D. Eastman. Yes, so many times.
So this one was published in 1961. Following is the publisher's current description of the book, quote, a classic, comic, easy reader about getting a pet. In this beloved beginner book, a young boy hilariously learns the consequences of not following instructions when he feeds too much to his goldfish, causing it to grow as big as a whale. With delightfully retro illustrations by P.D. Eastman, illustrator of Go Dog Go, the message of the book, that getting a pet is a big responsibility, is as true today as it was when the book was published in 1961. End quote.
That's interesting. Go Dog Go, which was both written and illustrated by P.D. Eastman, was also released in 1961.
Oh, some of that
Go Dog Go fame. Yeah, Go Dog Go fame. Yeah, boy, fame must have been different in 1961.
It's an excellent book, frankly. The Go Dog Go one is so good, actually.
No, Go Dog Go is really good. Yeah, and I'm sure Fish Out of Water is too. I've not read it, but now it makes me wonder. Maybe someday I'll have grandkids. Maybe.
Yeah,
so if that's the case, I will look up A Fish Out of Water to go with Go Dog Go by P.D. Eastman and Moo Ba La 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 by Sandra Boynton.
There you go. We have several modern uses to cover, and we're going to get to those right after we say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons on Patreon. And the cool thing about Patreon is it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. We have new things every weekday on the feeds. On Mondays, we have a conversation about what movies, shows, books, podcasts, and whatever else everyone is enjoying. Tuesdays see early access to the week's podcast. Wednesdays have all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode. Thursday has patrons-only polls. And Fridays are our lightly edited, behind-the-scenes video featuring all the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts you could imagine.
We've got some other pretty cool stuff too, like original digital artwork once a month made by me, and direct access to talk with us. No algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe does every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsig Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon.
That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
The song Fish Out of Water was released in 1993 on the album Elemental by Tears for Fears. Here are some of the lyrics. Quote, you always said you were the compassionate one, but now you're laughing at the sun. With all your high-class friends, you think you've got it made. The only thing you made was that tanned look on your face. With all your cigarettes and fancy cars, you ain't a clue who or what you are. You're dreaming your life away, fish out of water. Go swim in the tide today, fish out of water. End quote. There have been a few other songs using Fish Out of Water in the title, including one by Dolly Parton and...
Whoa, why didn't we do that one? Dolly Parton's the GOAT.
Okay, you can go listen to that particular song. It is not my favorite of the Dolly
Are you
Parton
saying Dolly Parton did
works.
a song that's not great?
I didn't say that. I said it's not my favorite.
All right. All of us can go listen on our own terms to Dolly Parton's Fish Out of Water and see what we think.
All right, so we could probably fill an entire segment with just music on this theme, the Fish Out of Water lyrics and titles and things, but we're going to move on to some other modern items. Natural History Magazine published an article by Neil Shubin titled Fish Out of Water, Human Ailments as Varied as Hernias, Hiccups, and choking are a legacy of our fishy ancestry. The article begins, quote, humans make much of what distinguishes us from the apes, but we actually share so much with fish that the comparison with the apes feels almost trivial, end quote.
Okay.
The article is several pages long, and it
I was going to say this is an area in which I have no knowledge, and you, as an anthropologist in training, I think would know a lot more about it. So I'm going to trust that you read this and were like, this is relevant to what we're talking about today, and I will just take that at face value.
This is definitely that like play on words where, turning it around almost back to the literal about humans being a fish out of water is the kind of the implied concept here.
I see, yes. And evolution, right,
yeah,
got it.
So the article does essentially a deep dive scientific exploration comparing fish to humans.
Right, humans, the fish crawling out of the water and then turning into that. And then at some point, one of them crawling back into the water and turning into whales.
This one's actually comparing like current like fish anatomy with human anatomy. And so it's got some different things to it. It's interesting. And if that's your jam, go check it out.
I believe that is fascinating for one such as you. And it just makes my brain hurt.
I'm actually more into like the ancient fossil, like human remains.
You don't think it was ancient when humans crawled out of the water and then crawled back in or whatever?
What I'm saying is that he's comparing current like fish anatomy to current human anatomy. So he's saying,
and you're just like, I don't care about current peoples. I only care about ancient peoples.
I like bones. I'm looking at way old bones.
All right. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. One time Shauna showed me a picture of like, I don't know, an elephant's foot and a human foot or something stupid like that. And I was like, she's like, all right, what do you see in the difference? And I was like, I don't know, it's feet. And she's like, are you serious? And I'm like, I'm confused now. But yeah, no, it just showed me what an idiot I was.
I don't think it's that. It's just like I didn't realize that they did look so similar to people who. Oh
yeah, duh. Because you're all like, here on the metatarsal, there's blah blah blah, and I'm like,
I was like,
what are you even saying right now?
This foot can't articulate the way a human foot can.
I'm like, you're lucky that there was a time in my life early on that I worked in medicine and know at least what metatarsals and articulation mean. But like, otherwise, I would be out of this conversation entirely.
Fair. Fish Out of Water is a 2014 video by Nature. We're still in the science realm for a minute. Here's the synopsis. Quote, around 400 million years ago, fish left the water and started to evolve into land-loving creatures. But how did the transition happen? A new and unusual experiment could shed some light on the kinds of changes that enabled fins to become limbs. Researchers took a fish species known to be able to walk on its fins from time to time and raised it on land. Watch the fish promenade in this nature video, end quote. The fish in this video is called a bishir, so it is different than the climbing perch that we heard a little bit about. The book Fish Out of Water, a Donald Dugan Mystery by Mark Barnard was published in 2021. Here's the publisher's summary. Quote, prizefighter turned PI Donald Dugan has been going through a rough patch between clients who are reluctant to pay for services rendered and Poopsie, his secretary's borderline psychotic lapdog. When Lieutenant Hammond, his friendly enemy on the force, suggests a week of solitude and fishing in rural Louisiana as a surefire cure for his woes, Dugan gladly accepts. Things go fine until he finds the dead man dressed in a clown suit floating in the bayou. End quote. I have a thing about clowns, so this one's a no-go for me, but otherwise it sounded kind of intriguing.
Yeah.
I love this next one. Sophia Amon won a gold medal for her artwork in the 2022 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. She was a high school senior at the time, 18 years old. Her work is titled Fish Out of Water. It's a red and blue depiction of koi fish swimming above a city street. The imagery is really fascinating. Amon uses 5-point perspective, which gives the image a fisheye lens appearance. So if you imagine that it's focused in the center and things are very even and consistent and it curves around that out, kind of zooms out, but in all directions, is what that appearance is. The artist described struggling with insomnia and some images that stuck out in their mind, which helped to create the artwork. And we're going to share a link to the article on Patreon So patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, and on our website, bunnytrailspod.com, so you can go check it out for yourself and read a little bit more about the artist. Fish Out of Water is a game by Half Brick Studios, available for iPhone and iPad for ages 4+. Here is a description from the App Store. Quote, dive into a thrilling adventure with Fish Out of Water, without ads or in-app purchases. A captivating game by Half Brick Studios, the creators of Fruit Ninja and Jetpack Joyride. Launch a group of brave fish pals into the sky and over the ocean, helping them travel far and bounce as much as possible. End quote. I also found the debut trailer, which was very silly, but it's just fun. I actually really liked Fruit Ninja and Jetpack Joyride games. They were pretty fun, so I was like, oh yeah, I'll share about this one too. Fish Out of Water is a kids' clothing company. Here's a little bit about them from their website. Quote, we get it. We've all been there. Every child goes through moments where they feel like a fish out of water, from the first day of school to joining a new sports team to simply trying to make friends at the park. Life can be intimidating for a little fish in a big sea. That's why we decided to create clothing kids love to wear that helps them feel playful, comfortable, and confident in their own skin or scales. They'll be ready to jump right in. End quote. I thought it was a cute little company that was like started by a husband and wife out of their home, like inspired by their own kids. So it's kind of cool. We all have those moments when we just don't feel comfortable because the situation isn't our norm or preference. Pretty much everyone can relate to this feeling. If you find yourself in these circumstances, like a fish out of water, you can probably look around the room and find a few other people who are feeling as awkward as you are. Personally, I find it helpful to gravitate towards the other awkward fish in the room so we can stand next to one another silently in solidarity. But when you are feeling this way, just take a deep breath and keep in mind that the moment is temporary, and you got this. Well, that's about all we have time for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
All right, folks, it is patrons poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, you win an all-expenses paid trip to a USA Pro Sporting Championship. Which one do you choose? So surprisingly, of course, it's the USA, but 100% of our patrons said the MLB World Series. MLB is Major League Baseball. Jan said, quote, I'd go baseball. I'm not a huge sports fan usually, but I collected baseball cards as a kid. I went to the NBC tournament and some local team games in Wichita from time to time, and I've been to some MLB games. Enjoyable enough, end quote. All right, fair enough, Jan. So not a huge sports fan, but baseball would be the way to go.
I liked that answer. That was a good one. Well, Mary said, quote, I am not a big sports fan, but I love a good baseball game. It doesn't even have to be a good one because the atmosphere surrounding baseball makes it a feel-good experience. Games are a mix of intense moments, celebrations, and total chill accompanied by all the best snacks and beverages. Being a veteran, I have been asked many times to sing the national anthem or God Bless America, which is sometimes sung later in the game since 9/11. Whenever I sang, they gave me free tickets for family and friends, so those games were even more fun because we felt like we were part of something very special. End quote.
Well, I will say I have heard Mary sing, and she has a phenomenal voice. So absolutely have Mary Halsey Lopez come sing at your baseball game or any other sporting event or anything else, because phenomenal voice, that woman, amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
And I could definitely that definitely adds to the whole experience.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's really cool.
Well, I love going to a baseball game. We have a minor league team in town, and we try to go at least once or twice a season. So of the options, I would watch a World Series game. Well, as a reminder, our silly polls mean absolutely nothing and are not scientifically valid. And patrons of all levels get to take part, including our free tiers. So head over to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod to take this week's poll. Thanks for joining us. We will talk to you again next week. Until then, remember, words belong to their users.